This video is created for informational purposes only. Everyone mentioned is treated with respect, and no harm or disrespect is intended. Viewer discretion is advised. On Christmas Eve 2002, a man drove 90 miles from his home in Modesto, California, to go fishing in the San Francisco Bay. He left his pregnant wife at home that morning, 8 months along, expecting their first child in February. When he returned that afternoon, she was gone. Her car sat untouched in the driveway. Her purse rested on the kitchen table. The doors were unlocked. Their golden retriever wandered the neighborhood with a muddy leash dragging behind. Within hours, search parties flooded the streets. Television crews broadcast her face across the country. Her husband appeared at candlelight vigils, his voice steady, asking for her safe return. But 4 months later, 2 bodies washed ashore on the Richmond coastline, less than 2 miles from the exact location where he claimed he'd been fishing that day. One was a full-term male fetus. The other was a headless, limbless torso, identified through DNA as 27-year-old Laci Peterson. Investigators would uncover a secret girlfriend, recorded phone calls where he lied about being in Paris while standing in Modesto, and cement anchors hidden in a warehouse. The man who played the grieving husband became the most scrutinized figure in American true crime, and from that moment forward, nothing in Modesto would ever be the same. Laci Denise Rocha was born and raised in Modesto, a quiet city in California's Central Valley where everyone knew their neighbors. She was the kind of woman who sent handwritten thank you notes, remembered every birthday, and never missed a chance to celebrate the people she loved. Her mother, Sharon Rocha, would later write in her memoir for Laci that her daughter had an infectious laugh and a way of making everyone in a room feel seen. She loved gardening. She'd spend hours in the backyard, planting roses and arranging flower beds. She worked as a substitute teacher and talked often about wanting to open a restaurant one day, something small and cozy where people could gather. But by 2002, her focus had shifted entirely to one thing: becoming a mother. Laci met Scott Peterson while both were students at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo. They married in 1997. Scott worked as a fertilizer salesman for Trade Corp, traveling throughout California to meet with farmers and distributors. Neighbors and family members later told police the couple seemed happy, stable, the kind of pair who hosted barbecues and waved from the driveway. By the fall of 2002, Laci was in her 3rd trimester. The couple had chosen a name for their son, Connor. His due date was February 10th, 2003. Laci spent those final months preparing the nursery, painting walls in soft blues and greens, folding tiny clothes she'd bought at baby stores around Modesto. She posted regularly on online forums for expectant mothers, sharing updates about cravings and back pain and the small kick she felt at night. She told her sister Amy that she couldn't wait to hold him, that she'd already imagined what his first Christmas would look like. On December 23, 2002, Laci and Scott visited the salon where Amy worked. She cut Scott's hair, as she did every month. He mentioned casually that he'd be playing golf the next day. Prosecutors would later note that he told several other people the same thing. That evening, Sharon spoke with Laci by phone around 8:30 p.m. Laci sounded tired, but otherwise normal. She mentioned she planned to walk the dog the next morning and run a few errands. It was the last conversation Sharon would ever have with her daughter. Scott Peterson told the Modesto Police Department that he woke up on the morning of December 24th, ate breakfast with Laci, and then decided to go fishing at the Berkeley Marina, 90 miles from their home. He said Laci planned to walk their golden retriever, Mackenzie, and then mop the kitchen floor. He left around 9:30 a.m. His cell phone records would later show that his phone pinged off a tower near the Berkeley Marina at approximately 2 p.m., but something had already gone wrong. At around 12:30 p.m., a neighbor named Karen found Mackenzie wandering loose in the street with a muddy leash still attached. She returned the dog to the Petersons' backyard and latched the gate. She thought nothing of it at the time. Scott returned home around 4:30 p.m. He told police the back gate was open and Mackenzie was in the yard with the leash on. Laci's car was in the driveway. Her purse was inside the house, but there was no sign of her. At 5:17 p.m., Scott called Sharon and told her Laci was missing. She immediately drove to the house and began calling Laci's friends. No one had seen or heard from her. At 5:48 p.m., Sharon called the Modesto Police Department. Officers arrived shortly after 6 p.m. The police report noted that Scott appeared calm and cooperative. He walked officers through the house and answered questions about Laci's movements that day. He described what she had been wearing: black pants and a white shirt. He said she'd been watching Martha Stewart on television before he left. Two things stood out to investigators. First, the weather that morning had been cold, around 50 degrees, and Laci, 8 months pregnant, had allegedly planned to walk the dog in those conditions. Second, Scott's fishing equipment was disassembled and stored in the toolbox of his truck, not easily accessible in the cab. When detectives asked Scott what type of fish he'd been trying to catch, he paused. Then he said he couldn't remember. The search for Laci Peterson began immediately. Volunteers covered Modesto with missing person flyers. Search dogs combed local parks. Divers searched the Tuolumne River. Family members organized candlelight vigils. Scott attended several of them, telling reporters he just wanted his wife and unborn son to come home safely. On December 28th, 4 days after Laci disappeared, Modesto police searched the Berkeley Marina, trying to verify Scott's alibi and determine whether there was any evidence of his presence there on December 24th. They found nothing conclusive, but the timeline they were building was about to take a turn no one expected. While investigators searched for Laci, another story was unfolding that would reshape the entire case. In November 2002, just weeks before Laci disappeared, Scott Peterson was introduced to a woman named Amber Frey through a mutual friend. Amber was a massage therapist and single mother living in Fresno, California. The friend who introduced them told her that Scott was unmarried. Over the next several weeks, Amber and Scott saw each other multiple times and spoke on the phone frequently. He was charming, attentive, interested in her life and her daughter. He brought flowers. He asked questions. He seemed like someone who had his life together. But on December 9th, 2002, 15 days before Laci disappeared, Scott told Amber something that would later become one of the most damning pieces of evidence against him. He told her that he had lost his wife and that the upcoming holidays would be his first without her. He did not mention that his wife was alive, pregnant, and living with him in Modesto. Then came Christmas Eve. The same day Laci vanished. That evening, Scott called Amber from his cell phone. "Paris is beautiful tonight," he told her. He described fireworks near the Eiffel Tower, crowds gathering in the cold, the lights reflecting off the Seine. He sounded wistful, romantic, and far away. But phone records later showed he was in Modesto, only hours after Laci had gone missing. On January 3, 2003, Amber Frey was watching television coverage of Laci Peterson's disappearance when she recognized Scott. She immediately contacted a friend who was a police officer who connected her with the Modesto Police Department. Detectives asked Amber to keep speaking with Scott and to record their conversations. Over the next several weeks, she recorded more than 24 phone calls. In those recordings, Scott repeatedly lied about his location. He claimed to be in Maine, in Portugal, at a friend's cabin. He never mentioned that his pregnant wife was missing or that her face was being broadcast on national news. On January 24, 2003, 1 month after Laci's disappearance, Amber Frey held a press conference. She confirmed publicly that she had been involved with Scott Peterson and that he had told her he was unmarried. "I am very sorry for Laci's family and the pain that this has caused them," she said, "and I pray for her safe return as well." The revelation transformed the case. What had been a missing person investigation now had a motive written in phone records and recorded lies. Scott Peterson had been living a double life. For 4 months, the search for Laci Peterson continued without resolution. Volunteers distributed flyers, divers searched waterways. Investigators followed leads throughout California. Scott Peterson gave several television interviews, his tone measured, his answers careful. Then, on April 13, 2003, a couple walking their dog along the Richmond shoreline near Point Isabel discovered something in the riprap. It was the body of a full-term male fetus. The location was approximately 1 mile north of the Berkeley Marina, the same place Scott had told police he'd been fishing on December 24th. The following day, April 14th, a jogger found a human torso on the same stretch of shoreline, approximately 1 mile from where the fetus had been discovered. The body was missing its head and limbs. 2 discoveries, 1 day apart, less than 2 miles from Scott's fishing alibi. For investigators, coincidence no longer seemed possible. On April 18, 2003, DNA testing confirmed that both bodies were Laci Peterson and her unborn son, Connor. The Stanislaus County Coroner's Office performed autopsies on both. Connor's body had a piece of twine tied around the neck area. Laci's body showed significant decomposition, consistent with having been in the water for an extended period. That same day, authorities arrested Scott Peterson at a golf course in San Diego, approximately 500 miles south of Modesto. When officers searched his vehicle, they found approximately $15,000 in cash, camping equipment, multiple cell phones, and his brother's identification card. His hair had been bleached blonde. He had grown a goatee. Scott Peterson was charged with 2 counts of murder, 1 for Laci and 1 for Connor. The trial of Scott Peterson began in June 2004 in Redwood City, California. The case had been moved from Stanislaus County due to extensive pre-trial publicity. The prosecution's case was built almost entirely on circumstantial evidence. There were no eyewitnesses to Laci's death. No definitive cause of death could be determined from the remains. But the circumstantial evidence was substantial. First, the affair. The recorded phone calls played for the jury showed Scott lying repeatedly to Amber Frey about his whereabouts, his marital status, his entire life. Prosecutors argued this established motive. Scott wanted to be free of his marriage and impending fatherhood. Second, his behavior after Laci disappeared. Investigators testified that Scott sold Laci's car 13 days after she vanished. He inquired about selling their home. He did not participate actively in the volunteer searches organized by Laci's family and friends. The lies showed consciousness of guilt. Third, the location of the bodies. Both Laci and Connor were found within miles of the Berkeley Marina, the exact location Scott claimed to have been on December 24th. This established opportunity. Fourth, the cement anchors. Authorities testified that they found evidence in Scott's warehouse suggesting he had made homemade anchors. Investigators believed Scott had created 5 anchors but could only recover 1. The prosecution theorized that the missing anchors had been used to weigh down Laci's body. Fifth, the boat. Scott purchased a 14-foot aluminum fishing boat in early December 2002, just weeks before Laci disappeared. He paid cash. He didn't tell Laci's family or most of his friends about the purchase. When investigators examined the boat, they found a single hair that was later matched through mitochondrial DNA testing to Laci Peterson. The defense argued that Laci had been killed by someone else and that her body had been placed in the bay to frame Scott. They pointed to a burglary that occurred across the street from the Peterson home on December 26, 2002, suggesting that Laci may have witnessed the crime on December 24th and been killed as a result. But the 2 men arrested for that burglary had verified alibis for December 24th. The defense also questioned the timeline, suggesting that witnesses may have seen Laci walking the dog after Scott left for Berkeley. The prosecution countered that those sightings were either mistaken identity or occurred on a different day. Amber Frey testified for the prosecution. She spent 2 weeks on the stand, describing her relationship with Scott and the lies he told her. She remained composed throughout, even as defense attorneys questioned her motives. The recorded phone calls she made were played in their entirety for the jury. If you've made it this far, I need to ask you something. What do you think happened? Was this a man who planned his wife's murder, or was this a case built on assumptions? Drop a comment below and tell me where you stand on this. I want to hear your perspective. On November 12, 2004, after 7 days of deliberation, the jury found Scott Peterson guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Laci Peterson and second-degree murder in the death of Connor Peterson. The distinction reflected the jury's belief that Scott had planned and intentionally killed Laci, while Connor's death was a consequence of that act. On March 16, 2005, the same jury recommended the death penalty. Judge Alfred DeLucchi formally sentenced Scott Peterson to death by lethal injection. He was transferred to San Quentin State Prison. For Laci's family, the verdict brought a measure of closure but no relief from grief. Sharon Rocha gave a victim impact statement in court, describing the loss of her daughter and grandson. "I miss her so much," she said. "Every day I miss her." She spoke about the nursery Laci had prepared, the baby clothes that would never be worn, the future that had been stolen. Scott Peterson has maintained his innocence. He filed multiple appeals, challenging various aspects of his trial and conviction. In 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned his death sentence due to errors in jury selection, though his conviction remained intact. He was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In January 2024, the Los Angeles Innocence Project took on Scott Peterson's case. The organization, which works to exonerate wrongly convicted individuals, filed motions seeking new DNA testing and arguing that evidence was overlooked during the original investigation. As of 2025, those legal proceedings remain ongoing. The Laci Peterson case became a cultural moment for reasons that extended beyond the facts of the crime itself. It arrived at a time when cable news networks were expanding their coverage of criminal trials, and it had every element that sustains public attention. A photogenic victim, a seemingly normal suburban family, a secret affair, and a husband who appeared to show little emotion. But beneath the media spectacle was a real woman who died at 27 years old, 8 months pregnant, on what should have been a quiet Christmas Eve. Her family waited 4 months to learn what had happened to her. They sat through a trial that lasted 5 months. They heard every detail of how she was betrayed, both in life and in death. The evidence presented at trial was circumstantial, but it was layered. The affair established motive. The lies to Amber Frey established consciousness of guilt. The location of the bodies established opportunity. The boat purchase, the cement anchors, the fishing trip to a location 90 miles from home on Christmas Eve morning, all of it pointed in one direction. Yet reasonable doubt is the standard in American criminal trials, and circumstantial cases are built on inference rather than direct proof. Scott Peterson was convicted by a jury that heard all the evidence and reached a unanimous decision. That conviction has been upheld on appeal, though the death sentence was overturned. Was this justice, or was it assumption stitched into a narrative? That's for you to decide. What is not in doubt is that Laci Peterson and her unborn son Connor are gone, that their deaths were ruled homicides, and that the investigation led to only one arrest. This case stays with people because it asks uncomfortable questions. How well do we know the people closest to us? What are we capable of hiding? And what are the limits of justice when there are no eyewitnesses, no confession, and no clear cause of death? The facts are documented. The trial transcripts are public. The evidence was examined by 12 jurors who reached a verdict. But the full truth of what happened on December 24, 2002 may rest only with the person who was there. If this kind of detailed, fact-based true crime coverage is what you're looking for, subscribe to this channel. I'm building a library of cases like this one, where every claim is sourced and every timeline is verified. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.